Hello, everyone. This is Jim Obrzezinski in the week 5 lecture video. So I'm going to get right to it. We have quite a bit to cover, and I want to make sure I get through everything. So we're going to start our work this week in Chapter 3. I'm going to try to tie this all together by the end of this lecture video. So the reason I really enjoy chapter 3, this is where we talk about writing in the middle, and the middle takes place in the middle of the research process. Ballinger talks about it in the beginning of chapter 3. Okay, we talk about academic writing as a conversation, either entering or adding to it. If you look over on page 92, there is a section there called The Unending Conversation, written by a famous rhetorician. Okay, his name is Kenneth Burke. I believe I studied his writings really as an undergrad and also in grad school. So you want to take a look at that, and everything we do is a conversation. You're either entering or adding. It's been talked about before. You have to see where you fit in this conversation. And more importantly, you have to have a conversation with yourselves in your mind, that inner dialectic process, that thinking, not just reading to look to locate information, but what can I learn from my source information? How does it fit the relevance to my topic? How does it shape and support my thinking about my topic, right? So it's not busy work, but it's a knowledge generating activity, and that's the emphasis of chapter 3. So we talk about writing as you read as a genuine conversation between you and a source. Whenever you're reading an article, all right, and we're doing a lot of work on a screen right now. So what you want to be able to do is have a notebook handy, have a pen handy. Write down your thoughts as you are reading your source material, as you're viewing your source material, taking notes if you're doing an interview with an individual about your research topic, right? Just don't write to record, write to make meaning, and follow your own words about a subject to see what you have to say about it. And this is going to be critical in the two components that we're working on right now, the EAB and the double entry coming up. Right? Now remember, when you use the voices, you have to use them responsibly. There has to be attribution, and attribution is naming your speaker. Quotation marks to quote, to mark passages, right? Quotes. Citation, both in text and a works cited page. In other words, we call this the cross-reference. Okay? Your in-text citation of your source use must match the authors in your works cited page. So I'll get to it at the end of this lecture video, but you want to make sure that you spend some time in using and citing sources section in Blackboard. It's there. I've moved it around a little bit. It should be relatively easy to find. There's a lot of good information there. Now in chapter 3, Ballinger talks about the taxonomy of copying, and this is kind of like different stages of what a lot of students do when it comes to working with sources, especially if you're paraphrasing or you're summarizing about how much of that original wording and source do you actually appropriate. This is really critical, especially when we get into the area of plagiarism. You're going to want to really take a good look and a good read on the taxonomy of copying there in the textbook. So we all know what plagiarism is, and I think everybody knows that it's someone else's work, or you're turning in the same paper for two different topics, and oftentimes we run these things through SafeAssign and Blackboard. If you wrote it for a psych class and you borrowed large portions of it, and for your 1102 paper, for example, it'll flag in SafeAssign and Blackboard. It just does. So, you're just going to have to watch that. Using information, not common knowledge, is really important. You may think it's common knowledge, but it's probably not. You're going to want to read the common knowledge exception on page 87 to become familiar with that. Using exact language or rewriting a passage with minor substitutions. A lot of this is plagiarism. I call it more so language appropriation. So the idea here is, in order to write well about a topic, you have to take ownership of that information so you can phrase it into your own words, right? So chapter 3 has a lot of that. We talk about paraphrasing. For one, there's that triad: paraphrasing, summarizing, and quoting. Demands ownership. Good writers find their own way of saying things, and this is really important when you're paraphrasing from a source, right? Summarizing, you're taking a longer material and turning it into a brief statement or two that captures the basic idea, argument, or theme of the original. You're boiling down a passage, but you still have to cite when you're taking information about, from an author. Think about it as intellectual property, that you're taking that from them when you paraphrase and summarize. Okay, when you're using quotes, you remember you have to quote selectively. The quote really just has to have an impact. When I go through your drafts or I assess your research essays, I'm going to look at the quote, and if it really doesn't add to your thinking, or it's just a generic quote to throw into a spot in your research essay and it really adds little to the conversation, I will comment on it and it will affect your overall grading. So you want to make sure you quote selectively. Provide the context, and we'll talk about that as we move into drafting in chapter 4, and there has to be a bit of a follow-up. Okay, everybody's probably heard all about the quote sandwich, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So you're going to want to make sure that you're aware of that, and that's all covered in the using and citing sources section in Blackboard. Now, one thing I want to point out, and we're going to be talking about the double entry journal here in a minute. Let me get some spacing in on that. Okay, so the idea here is that the EAB, I'll cover that first. If we look at this process of writing in the middle, I just want to make sure everybody understands that in the EAB, we have a section here in the course unit. Is it week 4? Alrighty, here we go. Library research. What is an annotation? And I think not only you need to really review this a little bit before as you're preparing your EAB, but the idea here is not only to look at your source material to find out it's credible, to introduce the article and the authors, but you're summarizing the main point, right? It's a brief summary, and then you're responding. What do you find most interesting, significant, convincing about the overall source? That is the focus of the EAB. So that's a 3-part annotation. Now, if we get to the next unit and the next assignment as we move through writing in the middle and working with our sources, this particular assignment, the double entry journal, takes it to the next step. So if you look at that inverted triangle or the inverted pyramid, this is exactly what the two activities are designed to do. You have the broad summary, you're looking at the author to establish credibility, you're looking at the relevance to your topic, then you start breaking it down into the double entry journal. So the idea here is you're working with 5 of those sources from your annotated, and you're going to dive into the specifics when it comes to individual quotes or paraphrases. So once again, let me get my PowerPoint back up here. You're going to be able to look at the individual quotes. So you're carrying on another conversation, right? You're talking about specific information, specific quotes that may or may not make it into your research essay. So I'll get to the example in a minute for the double entry. But remember, the EAB that's due this Friday, you're looking at an introductory paragraph. You have to have all 4 categories represented. Please do not say, I'm going to interview somebody, or I'm going to turn around and conduct a survey. Your interviews and surveys, or anything that you might use in your annotated bibliography, needs to be completed so it can be accurately cited and talked about in the EAB. And you need 8 sources, right? Make sure your citations are accurate and complete. Annotation, follow the 3 components. There's no quoting in annotations. You should be a summary and then relevance. 8 source minimum, and margins and fonts meet guidelines. Remember, your sources are organized alphabetically, not according to the assignment. So let's pull this down and let's get to the double entry journal. I believe I went through this example in the screencast real quick. But the follow up with writing in the middle, what we have is the annotation. Now this isn't difficult. You can copy and paste your annotation from your you can copy and paste the citation here from your annotation into the box in the double entry journal. You can also see that we actually have a quote here. Don't tell me what the quote is. I want to know what it means in connection to your research topic. All right, so I want to know more about how that particular quote fits into your argument or your conversation. Okay? Here, this paraphrase I found very impactful and important for Gen Z. This is what I need to know in this. So you're working with these individual quotes, paraphrases, or summaries. You need 5 sources, 3 entries per source. A lot of this information can come directly from your annotated bibliography. So let me pull this down, right? I believe this is going to be due next week. Let me go back to the PowerPoint. Yes, just want to follow up on the EAB. The double entry will be due next week. So this is chapter 3, writing in the middle. If you have any questions or issues about the EAB or next week as we move into the double entry, just take a look at the schedule, send me an email, and remember, as I mentioned about the annotated bibliography, you want to stay out in front of that particular assignment. So let me close that. Course units. Here to close, you have it right here. Using and citing sources, learning materials are all in one folder here. You have several videos that'll help you get acquainted with the using and citing sources. I have a lecture video on it. I have some MLA videos, and I talk about the principles of citation. So you want to be familiar with this because I do look at this when I do grade and assess assignments moving forward. All right. So once again, if you have any questions, send me an email. Good luck. Be safe.